weather's getting colder, the balls are getting bouncier, and we are ready and rip-roaring to go. It's the review, season 2. It's been quite a while, guys, but we're happy to be back. If you realize this, at the end of last season, there wasn't a lot of closure. There was a reason for that, albeit one that didn't get put into place until a couple months after we had recorded episode 23, our season 1 finale. It is ready to go. It is being published as we speak. It took a while to edit because, we all do have lives outside of doing this sort of podcast thing that revolved around graduating from a master's program or actual undergraduate college or finding a job. And we'll get to that a little bit later. But season 1 finale is up. If you want to see who won the 3-point play and you don't know already, then go watch that because we're going to spoil it in here very much so later. But go find it, watch it. It was a great time. Sam Bass was sitting in a car, had a literal sheet of paper and pen that was full of writing already that he was doing his answers on. It was fantastic. You're going to love it. And we have plenty more of that and plenty more college basketball coming to you throughout the duration of this year. It's a normal year. It is a normal year. Pandemic aside, fans are going to be in the stands. We're going to have a tournament where no one will get just kicked out because of one guy messing up. It's going to be fantastic. We can't wait. And we're here to talk about all of it. I'm Brendon Hodges, and this is The Review, flagship podcast, CBB review. Not the only podcast now, but we'll get to that a little later this season. For now, though, we'll hop right into it. It's my starting 5, and today we're getting a little bit philosophical with you guys. And there's a reason for that, because there are hundreds of reasons why you pay attention to every college basketball season, every college football season, every professional sport season. The NBA has just started. MLS is still going on. World Cup qualifying is in full swing. Go USA, beat Mexico next month. But we're talking basketball here. And basketball, more so than any other college sport, is fluid. It's subject to change. And that is the big reason why this sport is so interesting. And the big reason why all of you who listen to our podcast should pay attention to this season. But we'll put a pin in that real quick. Stick it up on your tack board. We'll come back to that later. Why do I say that? Because we start here. If you've watched this show, if you've checked out any of the stories, the great articles, the top 10 lists on our website, if you've just perused media in general, you know who these people are. They're the voice for this sport. We, in particular, are current college students, recent college graduates, people that you don't know, but you trust to give you information about college basketball. Do the best interviews, go to media days and meet with players, coaches, get stood up by Paige Beckers, for the man who's going to be joining me in just a bit. But we're also outside of this people. We are subject to change in our own right. This is a part-time thing for us. This is not how we make our living, though it's what we want to do to make our living. What we're doing is finding our own ways through life right now. I'm 23 years old. I don't know about you guys, but if you're 23 years old, you're probably going through a lot of the same things that I am right now in regards to change. Just bought a car yesterday. It's sitting in the garage. Can't wait to drive it 10 hours to my first full-time job. Before that, I found a part-time job that's remote. It's taking little steps and all of these tiny changes in life that take you at what seems like off the path that you want to be on, but in reality, build up your skill set to put you on that path eventually. It's just a detour. And last year in college basketball was what we would call a bit of a detour. Of course, 2 Marches ago, we didn't have a tournament. We were all at school. We went home because of COVID. Sports shut down entirely. Fast forward a year later, we're back. College basketball is happening. A tournament's being held in one city. And it felt like we were at least back into some semblance of normalcy, even if the Ivy Leagues canceled their seasons at the beginning of the year, even if teams were stopping their seasons a quarter of the way or a halfway through COVID, even if we saw a team knocked out of a tournament due to COVID-19. Change is everything. It's everything, especially now. What do I mean by that? like we experience changes as people, a move, a job, a relationship, everything in life can be compared to something in sports, a transfer, moving conferences, losing a player to a professional life, to graduation, it's a change. And there are plenty of things that we've seen in college basketball that over the course of this past year and a couple months, when we started this podcast up again, we're into season 2. So much has changed in the landscape of college basketball. 3 Boeheims are at Syracuse now instead of 2. Who would have thought that? We have guys earning money for their craft. We'll talk about that a little bit later today. Conferences are shifting. The balance of power let's be real. The balance of power may not shift in college basketball as much as college football with the moves. But when you have 2 big name programs in any sport move from one Power 6 to another Power 6 conference, and then you have teams coming to take their place and more teams come to take those teams' places in their conferences, it's a complete shift of power. And it's not just immediate change with the transfer portal and transfer waivers and NIL dollars. It's a change that's going to be working its way 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the road. We have another new team in Division I this year. That's a change. It's a team I'm familiar with. They were right down the road from my undergrad. I don't know how they're going to do this year, but they have the talent to do something, and they were already bringing in guys who had played D1. I expect big things from them, especially where they're going to be. It's all of these changes that have now laid out this roadmap where college basketball is, where it was, and where it's going to be. And I am here for it. You all should be here for it too. And that is why this 2021-2022 season is one that you should be paying attention to. It not just for the NCAA tournament, not just for the start of March Madness when the conference tournaments start, from day one. And right now we are 19 days away from day one of college basketball season, and I am absolutely here for it. Another man who is here for it, the boss man, beardless once again, earned his first full-time job, even though technically it's 2 part-time jobs that they pushed together. He's going to be in Rochester, New York. I don't remember the station name, but the boss man is here. He is our version of Charles Barkley, and you will find out why towards the end of this episode. He is our, not really fearless leader, but he is our leader. He is Mat Mlodzinski joining us on episode 1 of season 2 of the review, much like he did last year. Of course, last year, I was the one with the trees behind me, and it looked a lot more real than those fake ones in the painting that Mat Mlodzinski has in his background. Matt, welcome back to the review. Glad to have you on.
Brendon, glad to be here. Glad to be with you for another season. And a special thanks to you for being willing to host this second season, because I know that's a lot on your plate. But, I'm happy to have you on, and I'm happy that we're both going to be in upstate New York together again. So 1 year wasn't enough.
1 year was not enough. The change is everything, and there can never be enough on this man's plate. I don't have to edit these anymore. So that's a very nice. It's very nice to know that I don't have to do that unless I'm called upon in an emergency situation. We talk about change a lot in regards to the college basketball landscape, and we'll get to everything over the course of the next, let's say anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour. So we can keep this, we want to keep these reasonably length. We don't want 2-hour-long podcast episodes. I do a football podcast, and we brought 2 of our friends on, and it lasted 2 hours. I did not realize it was going to take that long. Wasn't absolutely held to edit. But with this change that we talk about, we're going to start from the baseline. We're going to start from not the players, but the bigger picture, starting with leagues, teams. And this was a topic of conversation that really came up more because of college football and the landscape that has with OU and with UT, Oklahoma and Texas moving from the Big 12 to the SEC. The Big 12, not necessarily known as a premier basketball conference, even though it is still a Power 5, Power 6, whatever we want to call it. OU and Texas, though, leaving doesn't necessarily hurt the Big 12 in any way because you still have Kansas there. And you're going to get a couple of more conferences teams in there that are premier basketball programs as well. BYU has been consistently good, and now coming to the Big 12 may have a better tournament chance getting in there with a better resume. Houston what was the Final Four team last year? Am I right about that? They were a Final Four team last year. Cincinnati has always been tough, and UCF has had stars come through there and guys transfer into there that are going to be very good players for them and will have built a culture there. But all of these teams moving around, in your opinion, well, first of all, the reasons for the change of scenery, I think, are pretty clear, and it all boils down to all that green that schools need. I don't know if you think that's a positive or a negative. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's always a positive from a school standpoint. I think the fan tends to first look at it in the first direction, is when I looked at it growing up as a Syracuse fan. Oh, I'm going to miss the Big East. I'm going to miss these rivalries, these battles. And it took me probably a good year or two to really get used to seeing the orange in the ACC. But then you start to learn a little bit more about how the business works, and you start to get a little bit more excited about the positives. And I think when you look at it, the Big 12 just hasn't put forth enough of a football conference. You know, you see Oklahoma there every year, but other than Oklahoma, you haven't seen enough. And I think if you're Texas, it seems like it's a fresh start on the football side of things. And if you're Oklahoma, now you get to play the SEC schools. And obviously it also went into the timing of the games. A lot of these Big 12 primetime games were not in the, the late night windows. So I think for the football reasons, it's galore. It's all these great things happening for these teams moving to the SEC. But from the basketball side of things, Brendon, I think it's going to be fantastic for these two teams. I mean, the Sooners have been there. They've had Buddy Hield. They've had Trae Young. They've had some of the most polarizing figures in college basketball over the past decade, and I believe they're going to continue that, because I feel like Oklahoma is a top-notch team in the Big 12 conference. They've had some legendary coaches as well to go along with that. Lon Kruger, just seeing him on his way out. And then I think Texas, a team that already gets a fresh start this season in moving on from Shaka Smart and taking Chris Beard. And I see Texas as a team that, again, they've been great on the basketball side of things. I mean, come on, they had Kevin Durant not too long ago, if, depending on how old you are, what your age is. But
what were we, like 7?
Yeah, we were pretty young. But I think Texas is going to be the real one to keep an eye on, because they're a program that has, I mean, last year I know they got bounced early, but they've got a great squad this year again. I think Chris Beard's going to keep them continuing to be at the top of things, and I think it just strengthens the SEC. Now you get to see Texas and Texas A&M go at it again, because remember when A&M used to be in the Big 12. And you get to see some of these other schools. There were a few schools, Missouri, another team that used to be in the Big 12 in the SEC. They've been there for a while, kind of re-meeting some of these other teams in Oklahoma and Texas. And then, of course, like you mentioned, the Big 12 welcoming in some really good competitors. And on the basketball side of things, I don't think either conference takes a hit. You might think at the top the Big 12 does, but if Kansas stays, and I don't know if they will, at least for now, both conferences are still Power 6 conferences, and no one's going to dethrone them of that.
I'm curious, though, especially with how things shook out last year, with a lot of the Blue Bloods in the ACC not being in postseason play, if they were not for all that long, how you think this affects the landscape of not just basketball then, but collegiate sports, because the SEC is going to have most of the football power. It's going to have a lot more basketball power because the SEC was one of the more competitive and one of the more postseason bound conferences this past year.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, because I keep saying the Power 6, but right now it just seems like the Big 10, SEC, and if we're sticking on the basketball side of things, the Big East are the 3 basketball power conferences that are probably sitting here, not really holding their breath. I think if you're the ACC, you're wondering, okay, is Virginia Tech, is Miami, Florida State, Clemson, what are they going to do? Are they going to make a super conference in the SEC? The Syracuses of the world, the Dukes of the world, did they see this as a time to, if you're Syracuse, a jump might not be it's not hard to say goodbye to a conference you've been in for a decade and move on to the Big 10. But if you're Duke or North Carolina, do you have to say goodbye to the conference that you've really built yourself upon? Because when it comes down to it, who knows what's going to happen if some of the other teams jump? The Big 12 seems to be trying to keep itself together, but how long will that last? And then you look at the Pac 12, I think being able to brand itself geographically speaking, they're probably sitting okay. I think they're in between. They're hoping that some of those teams don't jump, but they know that as far as the West Coast goes, there's not as much competition between all these teams to move. I mean, there's really a few options. If you're a Pac 12 team that's sort of on the Midwest, you can move to the Big 12. That's not really a great option anymore.
Well, they already have a team in Colorado who came from the Big 12 to join their conference. So it's not like they're going to go back anytime soon.
Right, exactly. And I mean, I think the Pac 12 can almost strengthen itself. They can look at the Mountain West now and say, hey, you see these other conferences. Why don't we start something up big out West and make more of a super West Coast conference? And maybe the Pac 12 will become the Pac 16 or something.
In regards to that as well, and we have this way down in the rundown. But I'm going to push it up a little bit, call a timeout here and just move it up. Bob Huggins, ironically, out of the Big 12 with West Virginia. And as we're talking about these major conferences forming these super conferences, 12 to 16, major programs, big time programs in a number of sports. Huggins had this to say in regards to those major conferences, the Power 5, Power 6, possibly pulling away and pulling a college football, having a college football playoff. An equivalent to that in basketball, and a college basketball tournament owned by and run by these major conferences is, quote, of course, they're doing it in football. Why wouldn't they do it? The presidents and athletic directors, they have all the juice. Why wouldn't they do it? Makes no sense why they wouldn't do it. I think it's more why wouldn't they than why would they? And then other people, they can have their own tournament. And this is coming from a coach who's had good teams in the past, but his teams have slowly been on the decline. You don't have the Javon Carters there and the Saginaw Kanates that can carry you into the tournament. It's not like West Virginia is a major player in the Big 12 anymore, and he's asking for that. It doesn't make any sense to me, A, from a monetary perspective with the rest of the landscape of college basketball, B, from a power conference perspective, because if you pull away, you're basically saying, we don't want to get upset in a national tournament. We don't want UMBC beating Virginia to even have a chance of happening in a tournament. We're going to kind of run away into our own corner and do our own thing here.
Yeah, I don't really see where Bob Huggins is coming from. I mean, you kind of spelled it out right there. This is a West Virginia team that has not been a West Virginia team that it was maybe 10 years ago. Okay, is that Bob Huggins play at maybe getting into the Big 10? Possibly. Maybe
they get killed in the Big 10.
They would. And I agree with you. And that's why I'm confused about this. Because I see the NCAA tournament. I mean, if they want to make more money, you're going to expand the tournament. You're not going to lessen how many venues are at stake, how many teams are at stake. I mean, these teams, sure, they make money off of it. So I know that the teams want the bracket to be as large as possible. But the NCAA makes money off of it too. I mean, they have all these fans coming to these games. If you shorten it to, let's say, and I don't know what he would mean by this, but 16 or 32 teams, well, then we're going backwards in time. I think we've got to go forwards. I've thought this for a while. Why don't we make it 80 teams? Realistically, you can make it any even number because it doesn't matter because it's so large at this point. You can have it as many. I know 96 would be the prototypical one where the top 32 teams get buys and then you play almost an extra round. But you can have 80 teams. It doesn't matter. Just make buys, make a ton of different ways to make this tournament work. As long as it's down to 64 teams after the first round or so, then you've got a bracket and you don't have to worry about things. I think that I'd expand, and I think that creating your own tournament doesn't make sense. And I think the NCAA also saved itself with passing the NIL, which I know we're also going to get to today. I think if this was pre-NIL, it might make more sense, but I think the NCAA has put itself in a good position now where the players can make money. A lot of people are happy about it. And I think, the conference realignment, this happens. It happens every 10 years or so. It's happening. It's the talk. But in 2 years, everything will be okay. Everything will be settled down.
Well, you mentioned your idea for expansion. I guess the question then is what happens to the NIT? what happens to all these other smaller postseason tournaments if you add another 16? Well, I guess at that point it'd be, if we're going 80, 12 teams, if we're moving even up to 96, it's another 28 teams. And then that takes away from the quality of the content that fans may want to go see if their team makes it and gets the bid to the NIT, to all of these other lower tier, yet still very exciting college basketball postseason tournaments.
Yeah, I think that raises a good question. I think when you look at that, I don't think the NCAA ever wants to get rid of the NIT just because of the history it has. I think something like that would just be too difficult for President Mark Emmer and all of the NCAA staff to really look at because it's been around for so long. But I think you can shorten the tournament to 16 teams consistently, maybe even 12 teams. And like I said, the NCAA doesn't need to go to 96. It can stay at 80. I think if it stays at 80, you still have enough quality in the NIT. Um, but I like the way it goes right now. I mean, it's the fun of March is being able to be knocked out by anyone on any day. And I think when you don't get knocked out and you're a power conference team that makes it that much farther, it's that much sweeter. And I don't think any coach out there wants their path. Sure, everyone would love to go 30-0, but I don't think any coach wants it to be a cakewalk. I think coaches enjoy challenges. That's part of the benefits of victory, being able to have that sweet victory in a game where you might not have been favored and in a win or die situation. I really think that if it really comes down to money that much, then we're going to see what some of these coaches really value, because I think most of the coaches out there would rather keep it the same way that the tournament is, because it's just beautiful what March has, because it still is, to me, the single best postseason tournament in sports.
Again, all of this revolves around teams moving from conference to conference. And the one that came out most recently was the big shift in power now from Conference USA. Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, North Texas, Rice, Texas San Antonio, Alabama Birmingham, all leaving Conference USA as early as 2024, I believe, to take the spots of the Cincinnatis, the Houstons, the UCFs in the American. The American is going to expand now. And I don't know if we can call them a power conference yet, but these teams moving in are going to have a better chance to boost their resume to get into the tournament. How does that then affect a conference like Conference USA, like the Mountain West, where BYU is coming from, like just where all of these schools are coming from? They then have their resumes diminished. We could potentially see teams out of the Missouri Valley, the Ohio Valley moving to these conferences next, the Drakes, the Loyola Chicagos, to try and get a leg up on their resume. I don't think they will, because they're fine in their conferences right now. They're dominating them, but it's a possibility here.
Conference USA, I feel like, was a failure when it first started. I feel like they wanted to make themselves almost like a Big East, and the fact that when the Big East went to 15, 16 teams, Conference USA said, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to expand, make a mega conference, make it all over the country. I think the Americans done it the best because they've had the best teams in there. They've had Cincinnati. They've had the University of Connecticut. They've had these teams that have had histories. Louisville was there. People forget that Louisville was in the American for a season. So I think right now you're seeing the Americans say, let's give teams some other chances. We still have, Wichita State. We still have, I'm blanking right now. We still have Memphis. And I think that Memphis is a team, to switch gears even more, that now needs to think about, what are we going to do? Because if there's a team, and there always is one in realignment, when realignment happened, in 2013, 2012, if I got my years right, Connecticut was the one left out. Finally, they found a home, basketball terms speaking, in the Big East. Now, has their football gone way down since that Fiesta Bowl appearance? Yes, but UConn's a basketball school, so I think they're fine. Memphis is also a basketball school. I know they've had some success on the football side of things. Shout out Antonio Gibson. But, I think basketball-wise, that's what Memphis is playing for. I think right now, Memphis should put in the best pitch that they have to get into the Atlantic 10 or the Big East, because I know that the Big East is looking at Gonzaga. They're still looking at Kansas. They've got to look at Memphis. And I think Memphis needs to look at the Big East. And I guess I've switched gears a lot over this, but it's because you really have to
hold on. You're telling me the Big East wants to try and take Gonzaga from Spokane, Washington, and put them? That's ridiculous to me.
I know.
Well, first of all, how do you make that work? with the travel, the TV scheduling too. No one gets to watch Gonzaga in the regular season, mind you, unless they're playing in one of those tournaments in the early season, the Maui, the Battle for Atlantis. You don't see them because they're out west. They're on too late, especially where we're going to be. Gonzaga, if they're going to go to any power conference, probably the big Pac-12. Let's just be real here. That's the only real option they should have, because I wouldn't, even if I have the best team in the nation, even if I have the best player from this recruiting class, the best team in the nation, I'm not flying back and forth to the East Coast every other week.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. If I'm thinking of the three top reasons why it makes sense and why it could happen, I think number one is because Commissioner Val Ackerman has gotten it done in the past, and now you see how quick it took UConn. And I know that geographically speaking and historically speaking, UConn back in the Big East just makes sense, but it did take them hardly any time. I think number two is, and I don't know how exactly, so, I wish I could know how, but the fact that it's a Catholic college moving into a primarily Catholic conference is some type of way for you to also make some sense of it. Other than that, man, can we move the University of Gonzaga? Can we move GU and
can we move 20,000 students from one side of the country to the other? That is a question there. Now, I think that you have a great point. Memphis, if they try to go to the A-10, it makes more sense because that stretches from St. Louis all the way to the Atlantic coast. And then the Big East is obviously right in that area as well. I'd see Memphis making that move faster than Gonzaga would. Gonzaga is saying, hell no. I know we don't have the best conference out there, but we're dominating this conference. We're shooing for the tournament every year. I don't see why they would even question staying in the WAC. First of all, though, I could see them moving to the Pac-12 if the invitation is extended.
And real quick, I had a friend bring this up to me, a friend of mine that goes to UConn. I'll shout him out real quick because his name's Chandler Boucher. He worked Big East Media Day. He was the guy behind the scenes while I was at Big East Media Day. He's a UConn grad, and he posed the question to me and the comment that you look at a school like UConn that's a basketball school but still has a D1 football program, moving their football team independent. He said, why not? If you're another football and basketball D1 school, look at what Connecticut's doing. Their football team might only have one win this season, but they're playing an independent conference where they've had more games on TV than they ever have in the past.
And I mean, you could make this, they're a lesser version of Notre Dame. Notre Dame has the NBC deal, and they're a good football team while their basketball team is middling in the ACC at best, but it still works.
Right. And that's what I see where other teams, like, does Memphis say, we are a basketball school? I don't think Memphis would take a big hit if they went independent. I think they'd still be a team that could go for bowl games, but we all know that Memphis is not playing for a national championship in football, but in basketball, this year they're sure looking like it. So does Memphis say, let's go independent for football? I don't know if a conference would keep their membership in football if their basketball went elsewhere. I don't see a lot of conferences doing that, but I think a conference like the Big East or the A-10 would take them in on the basketball side of things if they went independent.
Like we said in the open, change is everywhere, and it's going to be everywhere for the foreseeable future, probably for forever, with all these players moving, B, schools moving, and C, conferences on the brink of absolute disaster, maybe even dissolution. We'll move on to the more specific side of this, the players' side of not necessarily mobility, but monetary gain. NIL obviously passed earlier this summer. It's a big win for college athletes. It's the original player, what's the word I'm looking for? Player empowerment vessel that we saw was the transfer portal. Players able to hop into that, be recruited again, go where they want to go. And if they have extenuating circumstances, play right away. They had the transfer waiver this last season. And now you're going to have a bunch of super seniors running around, like maybe 5th, 6th year guys. I think there's still guys like that roaming around at this point. Now they're getting money to play too. It just adds on to the player empowerment. The biggest example, not even coming from one of those super seniors, University of Kentucky, Ty Washington. Good on you, sir, by the way. Signs a deal with the Louisville-based Porsche dealership. Like, this is, it's borderline ridiculous to a fault. Like I've always been an advocate for the players who deserve it. They should be able to make money off their name, image, and likeness. I had a college teammate, and this is a D3 school, who had to create a whole new social media like presence for himself because he wrote poetry and he published a book, but he couldn't use himself as an athlete for that. And that was ridiculous to me. And now you're getting guys who were able to benefit from that sort of thing. The questions that I have for you, though, Matt, is that you're going to have bigger brands, obviously. In basketball, it's going to be the Kentuckys, the Kansases, the UCLAs, because A, it's in Los Angeles, B, historic program. There are only a handful of those programs that you're going to find guys, at least in my opinion, who are going to really benefit in the long run from these deals. Not going to be like just thousands of dollars. It could be upwards of millions of dollars for a small 1% of college basketball athletes. And it mirrors in a way the 1% of just life in general. How do you think that affects the ranks of college basketball and where these top tier recruits look to go?
I think it's running as smoothly as possible. I think that when you look at the NIL, you look at it, and to me, the players that bring in the most to their school are the ones that should be able to make the money. I think that's the best way of looking at it. And I think that it's only going to go up in numerous ways from here. I think that in the next couple of years, it's all going to kind of even itself out. I think players are going to start to give back to their colleges because they were able to make so much in college during their time in college that they're going to start giving back even more. They're going to give back to their communities because they said, hey, my community at college, some of these kids go to college and that becomes their community. Depending on where they came from and where they grew up, that college becomes their community. They're going to give back to charities within their communities. They're going to give back in numerous ways. I think that's one way. I think the colleges are going to make more money off of it. You see Syracuse University, where we're from. I mean, they have a plan in place where Syracuse is able to help the players get the deals.
Oh, and keep in mind, you have players up there too. Eric Devendorf, new JV girls coach at
Shout
Liverpool,
out.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Big shout out.
And that's what I mean. It just ties everything together. I think that where you might see the most struggle is the schools right now, the basketball schools. I'll look at the A10 again. I'll pick on St. Bonaventure, a team that has been able to be really good over the past couple of seasons because they have a fantastic coach in Mark Schmidt, and they have a decent history, a decent track record, and they're sort of able to recruit, being in New York State. Now, though, they're not really near a major city. It's not a huge college town, and it's not a power conference. So now it kind of and I don't want to say that because Mark Schmidt is a guy that develops players, but Osan Osaniyi chose St. Bonaventure over Syracuse. I'm not putting any words in his mouth, but with the NIL now in place, I don't know if he makes that same decision. And I know there's plenty of people out there. But you know what? I also can't say that because the NIL was coming in place when Patrick Baldwin Jr. chose to play under his father at Milwaukee. He could have gone elsewhere. He sees where that's going to get him, but that's also, again, such a tough sample just because no matter where he goes, he's going to be a lottery pick. So I don't know, but I'm wary about those conferences like the Missouri Valley as well that teams may not be near a city, and now they're not in a power conference, and it's like, where do you go from here? Because now even more so goes on the coaches to make sure they are developing. But you know what? There's so many great college basketball players out there that it might not have a big difference anymore at all. I mean, it really might not. It's just we won't know where it's going to be at until like 3 or 4 years down the road from here.
3 and 4 years down the road, it could be, I would think, one of two ways. It could end up being what we hope it does. The pool of talent still spreads out across the country for purely basketball reasons. And yes, there's money on the side as well, but at least no one's going to be just called out for it, ridiculed for it, and punished for it because it's illegal in most cases now. On the other end, though, you could see this turning into a bidding war between a lot of the bigger schools for those top tier athletes. And then you have, and I'm going to use a football analogy again, Wake Forest picking up the 3 and 4 star recruits who fall through the cracks to build really good teams. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I hate to see a sport that is considered so pure in the way that it's supposed to play. Like these aren't amateur athletes. Let's just put that out there. These are guys who are going to be making money doing this for at least a little while. They're not amateurs, but the atmosphere around it makes it feel like that. The passion that their fellow students have for the team and how they make that atmosphere plentiful and prevalent throughout the course of any college basketball game. I'm not sure where it's going to go. And like you say, 3 or 4 years down the line, it's one of those things we just have to keep tabs on. And we're going to see this in the women's game too. I mean, you got someone like Paige Beckers out there. She's literally the only player that we have talked about in women's basketball, like in the first 35 minutes. You did get stood up by her though at Big East Media Day. That was nice.
Sorta. Basically, Big East Media Day, they bring them back, and I mean, I never really went to interview her, and if she's listening to this, then hi, Paige. It's just she's just
love to have you on, by the way.
Yeah, please.
We'd love to have
We'd love the press, and we'd love to just have literally the best player in women's college basketball, the most marketable player in all of college basketball, men's or women's. And I just wish I had that opportunity because, as I'm trying to grow as a sportscaster, that's the type of interview that I would have loved to have going forward. But I will give a shout out as well because Andy Katz, John Rothstein, and John Fana all did take the time out to speak with me for a little fun piece of content that I put down.
You know what? We're going to just take a time out here. We're going to play that video in this podcast. We're going to do this a couple of times now this year. I want to add in a few little, check this stuff out because this really pumps up the website. We're going to add in the video right here. This is Mat Mlodzinski's time at Big East Media Day. Go.
Mat Mlodzinski here with the Andy Katz, here with the John Rothstein. John Fanta taking you through the same 3 quick-hitting questions. I'll start off with one word to describe the conference.
Deep.
Openness.
Unpredictable.
And we've seen a lot of good moments over the past decade. What's your favorite moment in the Big East?
Best performance to me was Kemba.
Isaiah Whitehead lifting Seton Hall their first Big East title since 1993.
Great question. I think you'd have to say Chris Jenkins.
Best part about Media Day here?
It's just seeing everybody again, and it's being back in this building.
The fact that we're here,
Yeah.
we can feel comfortable being maskless because we're all vaccinated.
That's true.
And we can interact with people that we've been seeing over a computer screen.
Close proximity to a really good lunch.
Is that happening soon?
What?
Is that happening soon?
Stay tuned to Twitter.
Fantastic job from Mat Mlodzinski at Big East Media Day. Right in his backyard, so we kind of expect him to do it. But great stuff from him. If you want more of that, by the way, go to our website, cbbreview.com. We got top 10s and pretty much everything, conference previews, game recaps as well. And, of course, Matty Brackets will be making his return 2 weeks from now, the week before the season starts. Can't wait for that to see how wrong he's going to be at the start of the season for the men's tournament. We have some new writers as well that you'll be seeing content from, and we'll have them on as the podcast progresses this season. But we're going to go ahead and move on here. I don't actually have this in the rundown, but we were talking a little bit earlier, and I figure that it's a story that needs to be talked about because we mentioned transitions from conference to conference. Teams get losing players, but teams are going to be losing coaches pretty soon too. And I don't know how we've gotten this far into this and why I didn't write this down, but Coach K's last season, we already know that. Jim Boeheim is going to be out the door soon because, well, his sons are going to be gone in the next couple of years. And he's old as hell. Like, we're going to have two with he is. He's just super old. He doesn't act like it. He's a very energetic guy, a bit of a troll at times too, and we love him for that. But it's one of those things. We're going to lose two of the greatest coaches of all time. And I'm not really like, it's going to be one of those things where we mentioned it. Duke didn't play well last year, didn't perform up to their standards. Coach K leaves. What are they after Coach K? He is synonymous with Duke. John Shire isn't synonymous with Duke. I'm sorry. Not in my mind. Roy Williams left last year. Jim Boeheim's synonymous with Syracuse's golf team and the basketball team. Like, he's the face of Syracuse. It's one of those things where are we going to find? They're still going to be the faces of their respective schools until they eventually pass on, and we hope that day comes later rather than sooner. But who are we going to find in terms of the faces of these historic programs, these blue bloods, the Dukes and the Syracuses in the coming years is the question that I have. And it's not going to, I don't think there's an answer that you can give me, especially, but you know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just I can't really think of a time in college basketball recently where you lose like it's one thing to maybe lose a coach that was top 15 in wins, and then the next year another coach retires and he's top 30 in wins, but you're losing Coach K, the
The
all-time leader in
winningest
wins. Yeah,
men's and women's basketball.
right.
Though Tara Vanderveer is well on his heels, she's going to pass him eventually.
Right. And then, I mean, man, like imagine if Gino just quit in like 3 years.
Oh my God.
That would shake it up. That would shake it up. The times are changing now. I think now you're seeing, and I know he's been at the top for a while, but now you really see Jay Wright pushing through as the best coach in college basketball. And I really think he's been there already. It's just when you have a figure like Roy Williams and Coach K up there, it's tough to do anything to really pass them. I think Chris Beard's another guy. I think he's going to do wonderful things at Texas, but it also is hard to say that because in 10 years from now, who knows? Shaka Smart might win two chips at Marquette, and then we're going to be talking
Porter
about
Moser may take over the SEC
Yeah.
as the new Oklahoma Sooners head coach. You never know.
It's crazy. It's crazy, man. It's insane. So many good coaches.
Cameron Krutwig taking over the NBA, baby.
That'd be something. That would be something.
That would be something. We'll get to a little bit of NBA stuff towards the end. That's a hint towards our 3-point play. With the coaches, though, oh man, I'm gonna miss them. You know, that's who I've watched. I'm 23 years old, and those guys have. It's like Tom Brady. When he retires, the NFL is just. I have never known an NFL without Tom Brady. I have never known college basketball without Jim Boeheim and Coach K. And it would have been Roy Williams too if he hadn't retired just out of the blue, like this past season. It was, oh man.
I think that when you and I become older, you start to appreciate things more as you age, and I think that's what it is. And it's just, man, and there's so many good coaches out there, but these are legends. And they're such great people too that just do so many things for their communities. I just think that on top of it just makes it so much more kind of bittersweet because you always do have to, come in and replace the next guy. But man, it's tough. It's tough when you got coaches that have been on top for that long.
And coaches who care so dearly about their student media's academics. Coach K loves those economics majors. And Jim Boeheim loves the Syracuse University student media as well. We're going to get into our 3-point play. And there's a reason why I call Mat Mlodzinski our version of Charles Barkley. Not only is he terrible at this trivia, he is also the only one who ever does it because he's the one who shows up most out of everybody. We're hoping, by the way, to get the most out of all of our writers over the course of this season of the review. I'm hoping that with not necessarily bringing them all on for all the topics, but having a handful come on just for this part. So I meant to mention this at the beginning. There are a lot of changes to the review this year, just like the changes to college basketball. New graphics, first of all, if you haven't noticed. Eclavia, am I saying his name right?
Eclavia.
Eclavia does a fantastic job with that. Eclavia, thank you very much. I'm sorry that I completely botched your name the first time I ever tried to say it on this show. I really do apologize. He has done a fantastic job with that. We kept the music because you know what? The music's nice. I like it. It's very chill to a certain degree. But all the content staying the same with how we do this, and the 3-point play is my favorite part of it because I get to mess with every single person that comes on this show. And today, who better to mess with than Mat Mlodzinski? I said this was going to be NBA based, and it is because I am a big fan of EJ, Ernie Johnson. And there is a game that he plays with Charles Barkley called Who He Play For. We are going to play the CBB Reviews edition of Who He Play For with NBA players. Matt, we're going to go with 10 players here, okay? I'm going to take how many pages are there here? There are 11 pages. We're just going to pick 2 from each page, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to start with one that you probably know. Maybe we'll throw some like little game show music in here as well. That's a cue for whoever's editing this, by the way. We're going to start with Steven Adams, who he play for, Mat Mlodzinski.
Yes, and I did watch Steven Adams in college. He played for Pitt.
Not the college team, the NBA team.
Oh, the NBA team. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And he just got traded. He plays for Memphis.
That is correct.
Woo!
By the way, this doesn't count for anything. This is just for fun because I want to get multiple people in for all the 3-point plays this year. So this is our very fun way of starting the season. Let's scroll down here, find somebody that I don't think you'll know where they are. Got to make sure they have a jersey number, though. Let's go with Darius Basley, who he play for.
I know we're not doing Syracuse, but he committed to Cuse, and he decided to make the route to the NBA. So I do keep up with Darius and the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Damn, this is not going well. By the way, I didn't even mention the G League. We'll do this after we're done with this, but I have a question going back to the NIL stuff with you as we'll close this thing out.
Sure.
Let's see here. I got to find somebody that you don't know.
I'm liking it.
I got to find
starting out season 2 good.
We are definitely starting out season 2 good. Who he play for? Vlatko Kanker.
Who? I got 2 guesses here. I can only use one. I'll go with San Antonio.
That is incorrect. The 6'8", 236 big man from Slovenia plays for the Denver Nuggets.
Oh, okay.
I had no idea who that was, too. I just wanted to make you wrong.
Who he played for? More like who he.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, here we go. Who he play for? Chris Chiozza. Florida Gator legend.
Yeah. And I have heard Chiozza's name once or twice in a game, but who he play for? Is it Philadelphia?
That this is the one team I would know if he played for. He does not play for Philadelphia. He is a member. I don't know if he plays on this team or their G League team. He plays for the Golden State Warriors.
Okay.
That's a good one. I like that one. Oh, the St. Louis boy. Who he play for? Iowa's Tyler Cook.
Oh my gosh.
Man absolutely ran St. Louis with Jason Tatum back in my high school days. Whew.
Who he
was so good.
For? Minnesota?
He plays for the Chicago Bulls.
Oh, okay. Man.
That's a good one too. Yes, sir. Alrighty. Let's see here. Who he play for? Hamidou Diallo.
Hamidou Diallo. Is he on the Thunder too?
No, he is not. He is on the Detroit Pistons.
What? When did that happen?
That's a great question. I have no idea. Page 4 of 11. Here we go.
Oh my gosh.
You're doing all right so far. Let's see here. Oh, who he played for? Sam Bass's Virginia Cavalier, Anthony Gill.
Anthony Gill. Who he play for? Anthony Gill. I think he play for Cleveland.
And I think he play for a different team than Cleveland.
Oh.
He plays for the Washington Wizards.
Oh, okay.
All right to here. Who he play for? Udonis Haslem.
I mean, it's got to be Miami still, right?
Are you sure he still plays?
Yeah, I think he does.
He does. He does. He is not the oldest. Well, actually, that's his jersey number. Never mind. Yes, he does still play for Miami.
He's about to be playing for the Miami retirement home tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh man. Who he play for the 3 holidays?
Oh man. Well, Drew's on Milwaukee. Aaron is on Indiana. And I think Justin's on Indiana too.
You got 2 of the 3 right. Right. Aaron is on Washington.
Okay.
Who he play for? Who do I want to pull out of here? Who he play for? Jeremy Lamb.
Charlotte.
Indiana.
Oh my gosh. That's sad. And that's one that could have been a win for me, a W, a correct, whatever you want to go with.
Yes, it could have.
Who
he play for? Caleb and Cody Martin.
Hold up, I missed that.
Who he play for? Caleb and Cody Martin.
I'm dumbfounded. Charlotte again. I'll go with Charlotte.
For both?
For Cody. Caleb. Washington.
Cody does play for Charlotte. Caleb plays for Miami.
Oh, okay.
Who he play for? Ben Mclemore.
Ben Mclemore plays for Indiana.
Portland. Let's see here. Who he play for? Svi Mikhailuk.
The last team I knew he played for was the Lakers. I feel like I'd know if he was on the Lakers still. The Kings. I'll go with Sacramento.
He plays for Toronto.
Okay.
All righty here. We'll just do a couple more. Who he play for? Eric Paschal.
Oh, I know this. Golden State.
Utah. Who he play for? Otto Porter Jr.
Oh, man. Otto Porter Jr. plays for Golden State.
That is correct. And finally, who he play for? Baylor's own Taurean Prince.
Dallas? I have no clue.
The Minnesota Timberwolves. That is our 3-point play just for fun. We'll have an actual legit one next week. By the way, I also did not mention this. Only one episode per week. It'll be released on Saturday mornings. Feel free to watch it. Please do. Listen to it on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts. Am I right about that? Yeah, it's going to be everywhere. We'll have guests coming up in the next couple of weeks before we get to what we learned and what's to come next week. I had that one question for you in regards to NIL that I neglected to ask before. How do you think NIL fits with the options for players to go overseas at a high school or to the G League at a high school? Because that, I think, is going to be an interesting concept as well. You'll get more money, I would feel like, going to a big school with NIL or even a smaller one, rather than getting paid a little less and living in the middle of nowhere with the G League.
Yeah, I think that, man, that's tough. I think there's just so many avenues. I think that players if they can, man, because some players really do want to have that experience and go and play somewhere different or, do it their way. Not saying that in a selfish way either, like literally, like just do it their way. Like they got some freedom right now that they might not have later on, depending on, where they get drafted to and what situation. You never know what can happen. So why not test it out now? And man, I don't know. I think that it's going to help out. I mean, you see Kanye opening his little basketball school. I just think there's so many avenues. I just think that might be the toughest thing to tap into, just because it's just so many ways you can go. And man, I really don't know. Like, I feel like the NIL makes sense at the college level, but when you look at the high school level, you're like, what are these players going to do? Because they're in high school, and who knows who's advising them to do what. Like, it's not like they have an agent. When they're in college, they at least have the advice from their coaches. I mean, in high school, yeah, they have their coaches and all that. Sometimes it's their parents. You never know. But then again, what can I say? Lamar Jackson is an MVP candidate. He's already been an MVP, and his mother is still his agent. So just throw all that out the window, and I'll just, again, say, I don't know. I think that's my answer.
Let me tell you, Kanye may be laying the foundation for his basketball school, but the only other thing he's laying is brick by brick for Kanye's West Wall. That's all I got to say about that. That's all we got for today's edition of the review. Season 2 underway. Before we go, though, what we learned on today's episode, starting with Mat Mlodzinski.
I feel like, I learned first off where some certain players play, and honestly, if you asked me again, I probably still wouldn't know where some of them play, just because. Taurean Prince. Did I learn? He was on Minnesota, right?
Yes, he was.
Yeah. Okay. So I learned that. I learned where Taurean Prince plays. That's important. No, I mean, I'm just learning so much about this season in general. I can't wait for the season to start. Again, just plugging our previews, whether it's a team preview or conference previews. Make sure to check out the work that all of our great contributors do. Shout out to all the great contributors that have joined our team: Dan, Drew, George, Adam. I'm probably forgetting someone, and I don't have my phone with me.
Maddie Travisano.
Yep, Maddie.
Not necessarily a writer, but we'll plug the debate show right now. Matt's Madness, coming soon to a YouTube channel near you.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for that. I'm going to be going head to head with one CBB review personnel each time. So unlike the podcast, where we hope to have at least 3 of us or 4 of us in some cases on, the debate show will be Maddie moderating and me going at it with another CBB review.
Think of Matt as a mix of Charles Barkley with Stephen A. Smith's hairline. It is a very intriguing combination that I think you will all love, but he's going to get shredded every time because he's literally the worst debater I've ever seen. That man laughs way too much to be a real debater.
I am right now.
Exactly. What we learned today. Well, what did I learn today? I learned that Matt's going to struggle again this year. I'm calling it. Last place finish in the 3-point play this season. What's to come next week? Well, we'll check in with last year's national champions, the Baylor Bears, along with, I'm hoping for this. I have contacts in Minnesota. We'll see how it goes. We'll check in with the newest addition to the Division I ranks, the University of St. Thomas, out of the great state of Minnesota. Plus, a hopeful new blood interview with the former debutantes, the Bellarmine Knights, as well as a look into Matt's Madness with Maddie Travisano. But until then, this has been the review, Season 2, Episode 1. From Mat Mlodzinski, I'm Brendon Hodges. We'll see you next Saturday when Episode 2 drops. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Until then, take care, folks. Dribble a basketball, shoot it around in the rain. Do what you have to do. Get out on the hardwood. Season's 3 weeks away, and we can't wait. Have fun out there. Play ball. Play some basketball.